I'm Mark Kapner.
I'm Mark Kapner. I am that energy guy. And today we're going to talk about a couple of terms which I've used in past presentations. One is the peak demand. It's usually measured in kilowatts. And the second is a number which is the production-based incentive, which is a term that Austrian Energy uses for the incentive that they provide to encourage customers to do solar power. So first of all, the term kilowatts, kilowatt peak. If you think of electricity is kind of analogous to water in that there's two ways to measure water in a system. You've got a pump, let's say, that's providing water at a certain rate, and the pump is operating, and the rate is usually measured in gallons per minute. Okay, so one measurement of the flow of water is the rate at which the pump is pumping, gallons per minute. Another way of measuring water is over some period of time, let's say a day or a month, the total amount of water that that pump has pumped into a tank, let's say, the volume is measured in simply gallons. Now, electrically, the number which is analogous to the pumping rate of electricity, it's analogous to gallons per minute, that term is the kilowatts. Kilowatts is a measure of, at any moment in time, the rate of which energy is flowing into your building, let's say. That changes as things turn on and things turn off. It goes up and down. If you think about a graph which shows that rate over, let's say, a month, every hour during that month, there may be a different rate of pumping electricity. So the kilowatts changes over time. It goes up, it goes down. The utility company is measuring not only the kilowatt hours, which is equivalent to the gallons of water. It's analogous to the gallons of water. The utility is measuring two things. One is over the course of the month, how many kilowatt hours did your building use, analogous again to how many gallons of water over the month. And the second thing they measure is the rate of usage, measured in kilowatts. And they've got a smart meter on every commercial account, which actually moves up and down, but it stops at the very highest point of the kilowatts. That is your peak kilowatt demand. Very often that occurs in the late afternoon when the air conditioner is going at its strongest. But different buildings have their peak kilowatt demand at different times of the day. It's very, very hard to predict exactly when your peak kilowatt will occur, but you can look back at history, because Austrian Energy or whichever utility company you have is got a record of every month what was the peak kilowatts, and they even have a way of finding out at what time of day did that peak kilowatt occur. And that's very useful information, because that is the number you want to reduce as much as possible by turning things off for that time, because your electric bill consists of two numbers, and both numbers are a price times a quantity. The one of those numbers is your kilowatt hours times a cents per kilowatt hour. That's called the energy portion of your bill. And then there's another portion of your bill if you're a commercial customer or a large building, not-for-profit building, such as a house of worship. The second portion is called the demand component of your bill. And that's also a product of two numbers. One of those numbers is the peak kilowatts that we've just been talking about, and that's multiplied times a certain price, usually expressed in dollars per peak kW for the month. So when you look at your electric bill, you can see how much money is going to pay for your energy, your cents per kilowatt hour times kilowatt hours, and how much of your bill is going to pay for the peak demand. Usually those two numbers, each one is about half of your total. So peak demand is very important. Now, just an aside, residential customers generally, their bill usually only consists of one of those two numbers, the kilowatt hours times cents per kilowatt hour. Very, very few utilities attempt to bill residential customers for their peak demand because those meters are expensive, and the meter that's on a house only covers kilowatt hours for the month. However, more and more utilities are beginning to measure the actual, what we call the load profile, that is the kilowatts over time as they go up and down. So very frequently, a utility has the data to look at what the kilowatts over time is for a house. But still, most electric utilities are only billing for residential only kilowatt hours times cents per kilowatt hour, but for large buildings, for commercial, not-for-profits, houses of worship, for example, the utility is billing the two components, the energy, cents per kilowatt hour times kilowatt hours, plus the demand, or the peak demand component, which is dollars per peak kW times peak kilowatts. And that's the story of kilowatts and kilowatt hours and peak kilowatts. Now let's turn to the second, much easier to explain the second one. Production-based incentive is a term that Austrian Energy uses for its credit that they apply to your electric bill. A credit, basically, you're subtracting that from your bill. For solar, the production-based incentive is a cents per kilowatt hour that Austrian Energy will multiply times the kilowatt hours produced by your solar system, measured by a separate meter. And that meter reading is shown on your electric bill, and you'll see it's multiplied times a production-based incentive. For houses of worship, right now, by the way, I should point out that production-based incentive is not the same for everybody. It depends on how large you are. It also depends on when you're applying for it during the year, because it goes down as more systems apply for it, sort of a decreasing block. Right now, in November, early November 2019, the production-based incentive for not-for-profits is 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So that, again, that number, 5 cents, is multiplied times the kilowatt hours produced by your solar system. And that shows up as a credit on your electric bill. And that's all for now. So we're signing off. It's Mark Kapner, that energy guy. See you next week.